The eviction notice trembled in my hands as I stood outside the building I now owned, watching my daughter and her husband through their apartment window, completely oblivious to what was coming. 3 months ago, they'd thrown me out like yesterday's garbage, and now I held their future in my hands. The paper clearly stated, "Rent increases effective immediately, $4,500 per month." That was triple what they were paying. My heart pounded as I remembered the words that had shattered me. "Mom, Jack thinks you're just an extra mouth to feed. You need to leave. Get ready, because what you're about to hear is not just a story. It's a reckoning." Comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. It all started 6 months ago when I lost everything. My name is Margaret, and I'm 62 years old. For 35 years, I worked as a nurse at the local hospital, saving every penny I could for retirement. I had dreams of traveling, maybe buying a little cottage by the lake and spending time with my grandchildren. But life had other plans. The hospital cut staff, and despite my years of service, I was one of the first to go. "Budget cuts," they said, handing me a box for my belongings. The next blow came when I discovered my financial advisor had been stealing from my retirement fund. By the time the authorities caught him, most of my savings had vanished into thin air. Within weeks, I couldn't afford my apartment anymore. The landlord gave me 30 days to leave. I spent sleepless nights wondering how I'd gone from being a respected nurse with a comfortable savings account to someone who couldn't even pay rent. My daughter Emma was my only child, my whole world. We'd been so close when she was growing up. I'd raised her alone after her father left when she was just 5. Every sacrifice I made was for her, working double shifts to pay for her college, missing social events to help with her homework, putting her needs before mine, always. When she married Jack 3 years ago, I thought I was gaining a son. How wrong I was. I remember the day I knocked on their door, my belongings in 2 suitcases and a few boxes. Emma opened the door, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Her smile faded when she saw my luggage. I explained everything through tears: the job loss, the stolen retirement funds, the eviction. She hugged me tight and said, "Don't worry, Mom. You'll stay with us." For the first week, things seemed fine. I tried to make myself useful, cooking meals, cleaning the apartment, even doing their laundry. I wanted to contribute somehow, to not be a burden. Emma seemed happy to have me there. We'd drink tea together in the mornings before she left for work, just like old times. But I noticed Jack's cold stares across the dinner table, the way he'd whisper to Emma when he thought I couldn't hear. The second week, the tension grew thicker. Jack started making comments. "Sure is crowded in here," he'd say, even though they had a spare bedroom. Or, "Groceries are getting expensive with 3 people." I offered to help with money from my small unemployment check, but he just rolled his eyes. Emma began to change too. She stopped having morning tea with me, always rushing out the door. She'd avoid my eyes when Jack made his cruel comments. One evening, I cooked Jack's favorite meal, pot roast with all the fixings. I thought maybe if I could win him over with food, things would get better. Instead, he pushed his plate away and said, "I'm not hungry." Then he looked at Emma and said, "We need to talk, privately." They went to their bedroom, and I could hear raised voices through the thin walls. Emma was crying. Jack was shouting about boundaries and enabling. The next morning, Emma couldn't look at me. She kept stirring her coffee around and around, like she was trying to find words in the swirling liquid. Finally, she spoke. "Mom, Jack and I have been talking. We're trying to save for a house, maybe start a family. Having you here, it's putting a strain on our finances and our relationship." My heart cracked. "Emma, Sweetheart, I'm your mother. I just need a little time to get back on my feet. I'm looking for work every day. She finally met my eyes. And I saw something I'd never seen before. Coldness. Jack thinks you're just an extra mouth to feed. He says if you could manage your money better, you wouldn't be in this situation. You need to leave, Mom. Today. Those words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. Extra mouth to feed. Like I was some stray dog they'd been kind enough to feed for a while. Like all those years of sacrifice meant nothing. Like I hadn't gone without new clothes so Emma could have the best. Like I hadn't worked myself to exhaustion to give her everything. Where will I go? I whispered. Emma shrugged. There are shelters. Or maybe one of your nurse friends can help. I'm sorry, Mom, but Jack is my husband. I have to think of my future family. I packed my things in silence while Emma watched from the doorway. She didn't offer to help. She didn't cry. She just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for me to leave. As I struggled with my suitcases, Jack appeared behind her, a satisfied smirk on his face. Nothing personal, Margaret, he said. Just business. I spent that first night in my car, parked in a church parking lot. The cold seeped through my bones, and I wondered how my life had come to this. My own daughter, the baby I'd held in my arms, the child I'd sung to sleep, the young woman I'd been so proud of. She'd chosen her husband's comfort over her mother's survival. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. I swallowed my pride and went to a shelter, sharing a room with 5 other women. During the day, I applied for every job I could find. Grocery stores, restaurants, anything. My age worked against me. We're looking for someone with more energy, they'd say, or you're overqualified, or simply, we've decided to go with another candidate. But I'm a fighter. I always have been. Every rejection made me more determined. I started thinking outside the box. One day, while walking past a construction site, I noticed they were renovating an old office building. I struck up a conversation with the foreman, using my years of hospital experience to talk about workplace safety. By the end of our chat, he'd hired me as the site's safety coordinator. It wasn't nursing, but it paid well. That job led to another opportunity. The building owner was impressed with my work and offered me a position managing several of his properties. Within 6 weeks, I'd gone from homeless to having a steady income and a small apartment. But the universe had bigger plans for me. One morning, my new boss called me into his office. Margaret, I'm retiring soon and I want to sell some of my properties. You've shown great instinct for this business. I'd like to offer you first chance at buying one of my buildings, with very favorable terms. When he showed me the building details, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Emma and Jack's building. The universe was handing me a chance at what? Revenge? Justice? I wasn't sure, but I knew I had to take it. Using my salary alone from my boss and every penny I'd saved in those weeks, I bought the building. Now here I stood 3 months after they'd thrown me out, holding their fate in my hands. I owned the walls that sheltered them, the roof over their heads, the same roof they'd denied me. I'd spent days agonizing over what to do. Part of me wanted to forgive, to be the bigger person. But then I'd remember Jack's smirk, Emma's cold shrug, the words extra mouth to feed. I made my decision. The rent would triple. Was it cruel? Maybe. But they'd taught me that family meant nothing when money was involved. They'd made it about business, so I would too. I slipped the eviction notice under their door and walked away, my heels clicking on the pavement I now owned. An hour later, my phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times before answering. Mom? Her voice was panicked, so different from the cold tone she'd used 3 months ago. There's been some mistake. We got a notice saying our rent is being tripled. That can't be right. We can't afford that. I stayed silent for a moment, feeling the weight of this moment. Then I spoke, my voice steady and calm. There's no mistake, Emma. The building has a new owner who's adjusting rents to market value. Just business, you understand. But Mom, we'll be homeless. You know what that's like now. You can't let this happen to us. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. She was begging me to save her from the very fate she'd condemned me to. I could hear Jack in the background, shouting about lawsuits and tenant rights. Emma, I said quietly, I seem to remember being told that everyone needs to manage their money better, that family members aren't responsible for each other's financial problems. Ring any bells? The line went silent except for Emma's ragged breathing. Then in a small voice she asked, You bought the building? Yes, Emma, I bought the building. The words hung in the air between us like a sword. I could hear her sharp intake of breath, could picture her face draining of color. In the background, Jack's shouting had stopped abruptly. The silence on their end was deafening. But how? Emma's voice cracked. You were homeless. You had nothing. Funny how quickly things can change when you're not an extra mouth to feed, I replied. My hand trembled slightly as I held the phone, but my voice remained steady. I need to go now, Emma. You have 30 days to pay the new rent or find somewhere else to live. Just business. Mom, wait! Please! But I'd already ended the call. My phone immediately started ringing again. Emma, Jack, Emma, Jack. I turned it off and sat down on a bench outside their building, my building, and tried to catch my breath. 3 months ago, I'd sat on this same bench after they kicked me out, my suitcases beside me, wondering where I'd sleep that night. Now I owned every brick, every window, every door of this place. Life had a strange way of turning tables. I went back to my small apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, and no one could kick me out of it. As I made myself a cup of tea, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. Those weeks in the shelter had been terrifying, but they'd also taught me something valuable. I was stronger than I knew. The shelter had rules. Lights out at 9. Wake up at 6, out by 8 in the morning, regardless of weather. I'd stood in unemployment lines with people half my age, all of us wondering how we'd ended up there. But I'd also met Martha, a 70-year-old woman who'd been on the streets for 2 years after her children decided she was too much trouble. They wanted to put me in a home, Martha had told me one night, as we shared a meager dinner of soup and bread. Said I was getting forgetful. Truth was, they wanted my house. Sold it right from under me when I gave them power of attorney. Martha's story had lit a fire in me. I wasn't going to end up like her, forgotten and discarded. The next day, I'd walk 10 miles to that construction site because I couldn't afford bus fare. My feet had blisters and my pride was in tatters. But I'd gotten that job. Now, as I sat in my kitchen, I pulled out the leather journal I'd bought with my first paycheck. I'd been documenting everything, not for revenge, but for my own sanity. I flipped through the pages, reading my own words from those dark days. Day 3 at shelter, woman next to me cried all night. Her son dropped her off, said he'd be back. That was a week ago. Day 7, saw Emma and Jack at grocery store. Hid behind display. Couldn't bear to see them. Jack was complaining about the price of steak. Day 15, got job. Celebrated with $1 menu burger. Best meal I've had in weeks. Day 45, moved into apartment. Cried for an hour. Have my own bed again. Each entry was a reminder of how far I'd come. But now what? I'd gotten my justice, my revenge, whatever you wanted to call it. Emma and Jack would struggle just like I had. They'd learn what it felt like to worry about keeping a roof over their heads. But the satisfaction I'd expected to feel wasn't there. Instead, I felt empty. My phone, now turned back on, had 47 missed calls and dozens of texts. I scrolled through them. Mom, please call back. This is Jack. We need to discuss this like adults. You're making a huge mistake. How could you do this to your own daughter? Mom, I'm sorry. Please. That last one made me pause. Sorry. Such a simple word, but it was the first time she'd said it. Not when she kicked me out, not when I was homeless, but now when she faced the same fate. I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. The city looked different now that I wasn't homeless. People actually saw me instead of looking through me. Shop owners smiled instead of watching me suspiciously. Amazing how having an address and clean clothes changed everything. As I walked past a coffee shop, I saw a familiar face through the window. It was Sandra, one of my old colleagues from the hospital. She spotted me and waved enthusiastically. I hesitated. I'd been too ashamed to contact any of my old friends during my homeless period, but she was already coming outside. Margaret, oh my goodness, how are you? She hugged me tight. We've all been wondering what happened to you. You just disappeared after the layoffs. We sat down for coffee and I found myself telling her everything. The homelessness, Emma's betrayal, my comeback, and now the building situation. Sandra listened with wide eyes, occasionally gasping or shaking her head. I can't believe Emma did that to you, she said when I finished. You were always such a devoted mother. Maybe too devoted, I replied, stirring my coffee. Maybe I should have taught her to value family more than money. Sandra was quiet for a moment. So, what are you going to do now? Are you really going to evict them? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants them to suffer like I did. But another part, I trailed off, unable to finish the thought. You're still her mother, Sandra said gently. That doesn't just go away. We talked for another hour, catching up on hospital gossip and her family news. When we parted, she hugged me again. I'm proud of you, Margaret. Not many people could have bounced back like you did. Whatever you decide about Emma, make sure it's something you can live with. That evening I was cooking dinner when I heard a knock at my door. Through the peephole I saw Emma standing in the hallway. She looked terrible. Red eyes, messy hair, wringing her hands nervously. For a moment she looked like the little girl who used to come to me with scraped knees and broken toys. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Emma. Mom, can I please come in just to talk? I stepped aside and she entered my small apartment, looking around with surprise. This is nice, she said softly. It's enough, I replied. More than what you left me with. She flinched at my words and sat down on my second-hand couch. Mom, I don't even know where to start. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Are you sorry because you hurt me, or sorry because now you're facing consequences? I asked, sitting across from her. Emma started crying then, really crying, not the manipulative tears I'd half expected, but deep, genuine sobs. I've been awful. Jack kept saying you were dragging us down, that we'd never get ahead with you there. He made it sound so logical, so reasonable. But that night after we kicked you out, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times you went without, so I could have what I needed. Then why didn't you call? Why didn't you check if I was okay? Jack said it would just enable you. He said you needed tough love. She laughed bitterly. Tough love, what a joke. He's been on the phone with his lawyer all day, trying to find a way to fight the rent increase. He even suggested we call you and pretend to apologize to manipulate you into lowering it. That caught my attention. And you're here because I'm not pretending, Mom. I'm sorry. Even if you don't lower the rent, even if you evict us, I needed you to know that I'm sorry. I chose my husband over my mother, and it's the worst mistake I've ever made. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Emma continued, Do you know what the worst part is? Last month, Jack's mother needed a place to stay for 2 weeks, while her house was being fumigated. He insisted she stay with us, bought special food for her, even gave her our bedroom. When I pointed out the hypocrisy, he said it was different because she wasn't staying permanently. But neither were you, Mom. You just needed time to get back on your feet. And you did, Emma continued, gesturing around my apartment. Look what you accomplished in 3 months. You went from homeless to owning property. You're incredible, Mom, and I threw you away like garbage. The anger I'd been holding on to for 3 months began to crack. This was my daughter, my baby girl. Yes, she'd hurt me terribly, but she was here now, genuinely remorseful. But could I trust her? Or was this just about the rent? Where's Jack now? I asked. At his mother's, Emma said, wiping her eyes. We had a huge fight. I told him I was coming to apologize to you, and he said if I did, I could stay at my mother's. Oh, wait. I don't have one anymore because I threw her out. The bitter irony wasn't lost on either of us. I made us both tea, needing the familiar ritual to gather my thoughts. As I handed Emma her cup, fixed just the way she liked it because a mother never forgets, I made a decision. The rent stays tripled, I said. Emma's face fell, but she nodded. However, I continued, I'll give you 90 days instead of 30 to figure things out. And Emma? This isn't about punishment. The building needs major repairs, and the previous owner kept rents artificially low. Every tenant is getting an increase. That wasn't entirely true. Theirs was the highest increase, but it wasn't entirely false either. The building did need work. Thank you, Mom, Emma whispered. That's more than we deserve. What will you do? I don't know. Jack wants to fight it in court. I want to find a new place and start fresh, maybe without him. She looked at me with sad eyes. I've been thinking a lot lately about what kind of person I want to be. Turns out, I don't like who I've become. We talked for another hour. I learned that Jack had been controlling in other ways too, gradually isolating Emma from her friends, making all the financial decisions, always painting himself as the logical one and her as too emotional. Classic manipulation tactics I recognized from my nursing days when I'd worked with domestic abuse victims. When Emma finally left, she hugged me at the door. I love you, Mom. I know I have no right to say that after what I did, but I do, and I'm going to prove it. Not with words, but with actions. Somehow. After she left, I sat by my window looking out at the city lights. 3 months ago, I'd been broken, homeless, discarded. Now I was a property owner, financially stable, but more importantly, I'd discovered my own strength. I'd learned I could survive anything. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Thank you for seeing me. I know I have a long way to go to earn your forgiveness. I'm going to try. I didn't respond right away. Trust, once broken, wasn't easily repaired. But maybe, just maybe, something new could grow from the ashes of what we'd lost. Time would tell. The next morning, I woke to find 30 missed calls from Jack. I blocked his number. I had no interest in his threats or manipulation. My business was with my daughter, and even that would be on my terms now. I arrived at the building early to meet with my maintenance supervisor. We walked through each floor, noting repairs needed. The previous owner really had let things slide. As we passed Emma and Jack's apartment, I could hear shouting inside. Jack's voice was loudest, something about groveling and stupid emotional women. Everything okay in there? My supervisor asked, concerned. Just a domestic issue, I replied. Keep an eye on it. If it escalates, we call the police. As we continued our inspection, I felt a strange sense of peace. Yes, I'd gotten my revenge, but somewhere along the way, it had transformed into something else. Self-respect, boundaries, the knowledge that I didn't need anyone else's approval or support to survive and thrive. That afternoon, I was reviewing tenant files when I noticed something interesting. Jack was the only name on the lease. Emma wasn't even listed as an occupant. Legally, he was my only tenant, which meant Emma had no rights to the apartment at all. How very like Jack to keep all the control in his hands. I filed that information away sensing it might be important later. Around 5 o'clock, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I answered anyway. Mrs. Peterson? This is Officer Davies from the downtown precinct. We have your daughter here. She's not under arrest, but there's been an incident at her apartment. She asked us to call you. My heart dropped. Is she hurt? She's shaken up, but physically fine. Can you come down? She needs somewhere to stay tonight. I grabbed my keys and rushed to the police station, my mind racing with possibilities. What had Jack done? When I arrived, I found Emma in the waiting area, clutching a small bag of belongings. Her face was blotchy from crying, but I saw something new in her eyes. Determination. He changed the locks, she said simply. When I got home from work, my key didn't work. My stuff was in boxes in the hallway. The neighbors called the police because Jack was throwing my things around and screaming. But you live there, I said, confused. Emma shook her head. Turns out I don't. Not legally. Jack never put me on the lease. Said it was easier that way for taxes or something. I believed him because I trusted him. God, Mom, how did I become so stupid? The officer approached us. Ma'am, since she's not on the lease, this is a civil matter. He has the right to remove her from the property. We've warned him about the disturbance, but that's all we can do. I looked at my daughter standing there with her whole life in a few boxes, kicked out by someone she loved, homeless, because she'd trusted the wrong person. The irony was overwhelming, but this time she wouldn't face it alone. Come on, I said, picking up one of her boxes. Let's get you home. Mom, I can't impose on you. I'll find a hotel or... Emma, I interrupted. You're not an extra mouth to feed. You're my daughter. Now come on before I change my mind. As we loaded her things into my car, I caught sight of Jack watching from their apartment window. He looked smug, probably thinking he'd won something. Little did he know he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, because now it wasn't just business, it was personal, and I still owned his building. Emma was quiet on the drive to my apartment, staring out the window at the city passing by. Finally, she spoke. How did you do it, Mom? How did you not just give up when you had nothing? I thought for a moment before answering. I remembered who I was before everyone else's opinions mattered. I remembered the woman who worked double shifts while raising a baby alone. I remembered that I'd survived your father leaving, survived being a single mom, survived everything life threw at me. Being homeless was just another challenge. But I made it so much worse, Emma said, fresh tears falling. My own mother, and I chose him over you. You did, I agreed, not sugarcoating it. But people make mistakes, Emma. What matters is what you do next. That night, as Emma slept on my couch, I'd offered her the bed, but she'd insisted she didn't deserve it. I sat at my kitchen table planning. Jack thought he was clever, keeping Emma off the lease, maintaining all the control. But he'd forgotten one crucial thing. I was the landlord now, and I'd learned a few things about power and control in the last 3 months. I pulled out the lease agreement and started reading carefully. There were clauses about occupancy, about behavior, about maintaining the property. Jack had violated several of them today with his outburst. I made notes, building a case. He wanted to play games? Fine. But I'd changed the rules and he didn't even know it yet. My phone buzzed with another text from Jack. Tell Emma her manipulation won't work. The rent increase is illegal and my lawyer will prove it. Enjoy your little victory while it lasts. I smiled grimly and typed back, Mr. Harrison, as your landlord, I must inform you that all communication regarding your tenancy must go through proper channels. Please submit any concerns in writing to the building management office. Also, be advised that today's disturbance has been documented and violates Section 8.3 of your lease agreement regarding peaceful enjoyment of the premises by other tenants. Consider this your first warning. His response was immediate and full of expletives. I screenshot it and saved it to my file. Every angry text, every threat was just more evidence. Jack thought he was so smart. But he was about to learn what happened when you messed with a woman who'd already lost everything and survived. As I finally headed to bed, I peeked into the living room. Emma was awake, staring at the ceiling. "Can't sleep?" I asked. "Just thinking," she replied, "about how different everything looks from rock bottom." I sat on the edge of the couch. It's clarifying, isn't it? When you lose everything, you finally see what really matters. "I'm going to make this right, Mom," Emma said firmly. "Not just between us, but everything. I'm going to figure out who I am without Jack telling me. I'm going to get my own place, my own life. And I'm going to be the daughter you deserved all along." "Just focus on being the person you deserve to be," I said, smoothing her hair like I used to when she was little. "The rest will follow." The next morning, I woke early and made breakfast, real breakfast, not the rushed coffee and toast I'd grown accustomed to. Emma came into the kitchen looking uncertain. "Sit," I commanded, pointing to a chair. "Eat." She sat and took a tentative bite of scrambled eggs. "These are perfect, just like you used to make them." "Some things don't change," I said, joining her at the table. We ate in comfortable silence until Emma's phone rang. She looked at the screen and declined the call. It rang again immediately. "Jack?" I asked. She nodded. "He's called 43 times since yesterday. Each voicemail gets angrier." "You should document those," I advised. "Just in case." Emma looked at me curiously. "You've changed, Mom. You're stronger, more strategic." "Being homeless teaches you to think 10 steps ahead," I replied. "When you don't have a safety net, you learn to weave your own." After breakfast, Emma insisted on cleaning up while I got ready for work. As I dressed in my business clothes, simple but professional, I caught my reflection in the mirror. 3 months ago, I'd avoided mirrors, unable to bear the defeat in my own eyes. Now I saw a survivor looking back. At the office, my boss called me in. "Margaret, I heard there was some trouble at the Harrison building yesterday." I filled him in on the situation, keeping it professional despite the personal nature. He listened carefully, nodding. "You're handling this well," he said. "But be careful. Hurt people hurt people. This Jack sounds like he could be trouble." "I can handle him," I assured him. "I've handled worse." That afternoon, I received a formal letter from Jack's lawyer demanding I rescind the rent increase. I forwarded it to the building's legal team, who responded that the increase was perfectly legal and in line with market rates. They also noted the lease violations from the previous day's incident. When I got home that evening, I found Emma cooking dinner. The smell of garlic and herbs filled my small apartment. "I hope you don't mind," she said. "I wanted to contribute something." "It smells wonderful," I said, and meant it. Over dinner, Emma told me she'd spent the day job hunting and apartment searching. "I'm not going to be a burden, Mom. I'll pay rent while I'm here, help with groceries, whatever you need." "Just focus on getting your life together," I said. "That's payment enough." That night, as we watched TV together, some mindless comedy that made us both laugh, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not just for my own future, but for Emma's too. She'd taken the first hard step of leaving a toxic situation. The road ahead would be difficult, but she wouldn't walk it alone. My phone buzzed with an email from the building's legal team. They'd reviewed Jack's lease and found numerous minor violations over the past year. Late payments, unauthorized modifications to the apartment, noise complaints from neighbor. Nothing major by itself, but together they painted a picture of a problematic tenant. "Good to know," I murmured. "What's that?" Emma asked. "Just business," I replied. But inside, I was thinking about karma, justice, and the long game. Jack had made this a war when he'd thrown my daughter's belongings in the hallway. He just didn't know yet that I'd already won. The next few days fell into a routine. Emma job hunted during the day while I worked. Evenings we spent together, cooking, talking, slowly rebuilding our relationship. She told me more about her marriage, how Jack had gradually taken control of every aspect of their lives. How he'd convinced her that his way was always the right way, that her opinions were too emotional, too illogical. He even controlled what I wore, she admitted one evening. Said I dressed too young for my age, that it was embarrassing. I looked at my daughter, 28, beautiful, intelligent, and felt rage at how diminished she'd become, but also pride at how she was fighting back now. On Friday, I received another letter from Jack's lawyer. This one threatened a lawsuit for emotional distress and violation of tenant rights. I laughed out loud, causing my supervisor to look at me strangely. "Sorry," I said. "Just the irony." That weekend, Emma and I went apartment hunting together. She'd saved some money in a personal account Jack didn't know about. "Maybe I wasn't as completely under his control as I thought," she'd said, "and could afford a modest place." We looked at 5 apartments. At each one, I watched Emma carefully consider her options, ask smart questions, think for herself. It was like watching her come back to life. At the last apartment, a small but sunny 1-bedroom in a safe neighborhood, Emma turned to me. "This one feels right. What do you think?" "I think you should trust your instincts," I said. "They're good when you listen to them." She put in an application on the spot. As we walked back to my car, she linked her arm through mine. "Mom, thank you. Not just for letting me stay, but for showing me what strength looks like." "You always had it in you," I replied. "Sometimes we just need to lose everything to find it." That evening, Jack showed up at my apartment. I saw him through the peephole, pounding on the door, demanding to talk to Emma. I didn't open it, just called building security. The irony of calling security on a tenant in a building I owned wasn't lost on me. Emma watched from the couch, pale but determined. "I'm not going back to him," she said, as much to herself as to me. "Good," I said simply. Monday morning brought a new surprise. I arrived at work to find an eviction notice on my desk. Not for Jack, but from him, trying to evict me from my own building's management office. The grounds? Harassment and violation of his rights as a tenant. My boss looked at it and burst out laughing. "Is he serious? He's trying to evict the landlord?" "He's desperate, Mum," I said. "Desperate people do stupid things." The legal team had a field day with it. Not only was the eviction notice legally nonsensical, but it gave us more ammunition for our own case against Jack. Every action he took just dug his hole deeper. That afternoon, I was inspecting the building's laundry room when I overheard 2 tenants talking. "Did you hear about 3B? One said. "Apparently he kicked his wife out and she's homeless now." "That's awful," the other replied. "He always seemed so controlling. Remember when he yelled at her for talking to us in the hallway?" I filed that information away. Witnesses to Jack's behavior could be valuable if things escalated legally. Emma got the apartment. When she told me, we both cried. Her from relief and hope, me from pride, and my baby girl was standing on her own feet again. "I move in next week," she said. "Mom, I want you to know, even when I have my own place, I want us to stay close. I want to earn back your trust." "One day at a time," I said. "That's all any of us can do." As the 30-day notice period ticked down, Jack's behavior became increasingly erratic. He left threatening voicemails for both Emma and me. He tried to organize other tenants against the rent increases, but most were just happy the building would finally get proper maintenance. Then, with just a week left before the rent increase took effect, everything exploded. I was at home, helping Emma pack her things for her move, when my phone rang. It was building security. "Mrs. Peterson, we have a situation. Mr. Harrison has barricaded himself in his apartment and is threatening to burn his lease if anyone tries to evict him." I sighed. "Call the police. I'll be right there." Emma looked at me with wide eyes. "Is he serious?" "Probably just another tantrum," I said. But we can't take chances with fire threats in a residential building. As I drove to the building, I thought about how this had all started. A simple request from a desperate mother for temporary shelter. A daughter's choice to prioritize her husband's comfort over her mother's survival. And now, 3 months later, here we were. The tables completely turned, the power dynamics reversed, and the man who'd called me an extra mouth to feed was barricaded in an apartment I owned, making empty threats. When I arrived, police cars were already outside. Officers were trying to talk Jack down through his door. Other tenants had been evacuated as a precaution. I stood with the building security providing information as needed. "He's just scared," Emma said quietly beside me. She'd insisted on coming, wanting to face this head on. This is how he acts when he's not in control. After 2 hours, Jack finally came out, escorted by police. He looked haggard, diminished. As they led him past us, he locked eyes with me. "You win," he spat. "Hope you're happy, you vindictive witch." I didn't respond. There was no victory in watching someone self-destruct, even someone who'd hurt me. There was only the sad realization that he'd created his own downfall through cruelty and the need to control others. The police gave him a formal warning about the threats and disturbance. The building's legal team immediately began eviction proceedings based on the lease violations and threats to the property. Jack had essentially evicted himself through his own actions. That night, Emma and I sat in my apartment, exhausted from the day's drama. "I can't believe I married him," she said quietly. "How did I not see what he was?" "People show you what they want you to see," I replied. "And sometimes we see what we want to believe." The next morning brought yet another surprise. Jack's mother called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Mrs. Peterson, this is Helen Harrison. I wanted to apologize for my son's behavior and to thank you for not pressing charges." I was speechless for a moment. You're welcome." "I know what he did to you," she continued, "throwing you out when you needed help. I told him it was wrong, but he never listens to me. And now look where it's gotten him." We talked for a few minutes. She told me Jack had always been controlling, even as a child. She'd hoped marriage would mellow him, but instead, he'd just found someone else to control. "Take care of Emma," she said before hanging up. "She deserves better than what my son gave her." The eviction process moved quickly, given Jack's documented violations. Within 2 weeks, he was gone, moved back in with his mother. Emma was already in her new apartment, building her new life. And I was left standing in the empty unit that had caused so much drama. I walked through the rooms, remembering that day 3 months ago when I'd stood at this same door, begging for shelter. The apartment looked smaller now, shabbier. It needed new flooring, fresh paint, updated fixtures. I made notes for the renovation team. As I stood in what had been Emma's kitchen, my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "Dinner Sunday, I'm cooking, I want you to see my place." I smiled and typed back, "I'll bring dessert." Life had a funny way of coming full circle. 3 months ago, I'd been broken, homeless, betrayed by the person I loved most. Now I was a property owner, financially stable and slowly rebuilding my relationship with my daughter. The journey had been hell, but I'd emerged stronger. I locked up the apartment and headed back to my office. There was work to do, other tenants to manage, a business to run. But first, I had a call to make. "Sandra, it's Margaret. Are you free for coffee? I have an update on the Emma situation." As I waited for her response, I looked out my office window at the city below. Somewhere out there were other mothers being told they were extra mouths to feed. Other people facing betrayal by those they loved. Other souls learning that rock bottom could be a foundation to build something better. My story wasn't unique, but it was mine, and I'd earned every bit of the peace I'd found. The building was just property, the money just numbers in an account. The real victory was simpler. I'd learned my worth wasn't determined by anyone else. Not by my daughter, not by her husband, not by society. I was not an extra mouth to feed. I was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who'd faced the worst and came out stronger, and that was worth more than any building. But I kept the building anyway, just business after all. Sunday came quickly. I stood outside Emma's new apartment holding a homemade apple pie, her favorite from childhood. When she opened the door, I saw something I hadn't seen in years, genuine happiness in her eyes. "Mom, come in! I have so much to show you." Her apartment was small, but already felt like home. She'd decorated with thrift store finds and items she'd saved from storage. Photos covered one wall, pictures of us from happier times, before Jack, before the betrayal, when we were just mother and daughter against the world. "It's perfect," I said, meaning it. Over dinner, a simple but delicious pasta dish, Emma told me about her new job at a marketing firm, her therapy sessions, her plans for the future. She was animated, alive, free. "I've been thinking," she said over dessert, "about forgiveness. Not just asking for yours, but forgiving myself. The therapist says I was in an emotionally abusive relationship, that Jack isolated me, manipulated me. It doesn't excuse what I did to you, but it helps me understand how I got there." I reached across the table and took her hand. "We both have healing to do, but we'll do it together this time." As I drove home that night, I thought about the strange twists life takes. If someone had told me 3 months ago that I'd own a building, that Emma would leave Jack, that we'd be sharing Sunday dinners again, I'd have thought they were crazy. But here we were. My phone rang as I parked. Unknown number. "Hello? Mrs. Peterson, this is Tom Williams from Channel 7 News. We heard about your story. Going from homeless to property owner in 3 months. We'd love to interview you for our human interest segment." I paused, considering. My story could help others, show them that rock bottom wasn't the end, but it would also expose Emma's role in my homelessness. "I appreciate the interest," I said carefully. "Let me think about it." As I entered my apartment, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a handwritten letter from Jack. I almost threw it away unread, but curiosity won again. "Margaret," it began, "I know you have no reason to read this, but I need to say something. I was wrong. About everything. I've been wrong my whole life, thinking control meant strength. That kindness was weakness. Losing Emma, losing my home, has taught me otherwise. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I became this person. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that your strength in the face of my cruelty has changed me. Maybe that's something. Jack." I read it twice, then filed it away. People could change. I was proof of that. Whether Jack would truly change remained to be seen, but it wasn't my concern anymore. My focus was on my future and rebuilding my relationship with Emma. The next morning, I made a decision. I called the news station back. "I'll do the interview," I said, but on one condition. I want to focus on resources for homeless women, especially older women. This isn't about revenge or family drama. It's about survival and hope. They agreed. The interview aired a week later. I didn't mention Emma or Jack by name, just said I'd been kicked out by family and had to rebuild. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of women reached out with their own stories. A local shelter asked if I'd speak at their fundraiser. A city councilwoman wanted to discuss affordable housing initiatives. Emma watched the interview with me. When it ended, she was crying. "I'm so proud of you, Mom, and so ashamed of myself." "The past is past," I said. "What matters is what we do now." And what we did was move forward. Emma thrived in her new job and apartment. We had dinner every Sunday, slowly rebuilding the trust between us. I continued managing properties, but also started volunteering at the shelter where I'd once stayed, helping other women navigate the system. 6 months after that terrible night when Jack threw Emma out, we sat in her apartment celebrating her promotion. "I have something to tell you," she said nervously. "I've been accepted to graduate school, business administration. I want to learn how to build something of my own, like you did." Pride swelled in my chest. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." "There's more," she continued. "I've been saving and I want to invest in real estate. Small at first, maybe a rental property. I was hoping you'd teach me," Emma finished, her eyes hopeful but uncertain. "I know I have no right to ask for your guidance after what I did, but you've built something amazing from nothing. I want to learn how to stand on my own feet, really stand on them." I set down my wine glass and studied my daughter. 6 months ago, she'd been a shell of herself, controlled by Jack, unable to make a decision without his input. Now she sat before me with fire in her eyes and dreams of her own. "It's not easy," I warned. "Property management means dealing with difficult people, late-night emergencies, financial risks. Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I'm ready to try," she said firmly. "I've already started researching. There's a small duplex for sale in the neighborhood where I grew up. It needs work, but the bones are good. I've run the numbers." She pulled out a folder and spread papers across the table, market analysis, repair estimates, rental projections. I was impressed. She'd done her homework. "Where did you learn all this?" I asked, examining her calculations. "I've been taking online courses," she admitted, "and reading everything I can find. Plus, I may have been secretly taking notes every time you talk about your work." I couldn't help but smile. "Well, your numbers look sound, but buying property is just the beginning. The real work comes after." "Then teach me," she said. "Please. I want to build something real, something that's mine, something no one can take away from me." I heard echoes of my own journey in her words, the determination to never be vulnerable again, never be at someone else's mercy. It was both heartbreaking and inspiring. "Okay," I said, "we'll start with the basics. But Emma, if we do this, we do it right. No shortcuts, no emotional decisions. Business is business." "Just like you taught me," she said softly. "The hard way." Over the next few weeks, I took Emma through everything I'd learned. We visited properties together, analyzed deals, discussed tenant law. She absorbed it all like a sponge, asking smart questions, challenging assumptions. The meek woman who'd let Jack control her life was gone, replaced by someone sharp and determined. One evening, as we reviewed contracts at my kitchen table, my phone rang. It was Helen Harrison, Jack's mother. "Margaret, I'm sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know. Jack's been hospitalized. He tried to hurt himself." My blood ran cold. Despite everything, I felt a pang of human concern. "Is he okay?" "He's stable now, in psychiatric hold. He left a note mentioning you and Emma, apologizing again. The doctors think he's been spiraling since the eviction. I thought Emma should know, in case she wants to—" "I don't know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called." After hanging up, I looked at Emma, who'd heard enough to understand. Her face had gone pale. "He's sick, Mom," she said quietly. "He was always sick, wasn't he? The control, the anger, the manipulation. It was sickness." "Maybe," I said. "But sickness doesn't excuse cruelty. You can feel compassion for someone's struggles without taking responsibility for them." Emma nodded slowly. "I don't want to see him. Does that make me cruel?" "It makes you someone with healthy boundaries," I assured her. "Something you're still learning." She decided to send a card to Jack's mother, expressing hope for his recovery but making clear she wouldn't be visiting. It was a mature response, balancing compassion with self-protection. The duplex Emma wanted came on the market the following month. We toured it together, me pointing out issues she might have missed. Water stains suggesting roof problems, cracks indicating foundation settling, outdated electrical that would need updating. "It's a lot of work," I said, as we stood in the overgrown backyard. "I'm not afraid of work," Emma replied. "I'm afraid of depending on someone else for my security." "Never again, Mom." She made an offer, negotiated like a pro, and closed the deal 6 weeks later. I stood with her at the closing, watching her sign papers with a steady hand, my daughter, the property owner. The student had indeed become the master. The first tenants she inherited were challenging, a couple who'd been chronically late with rent. To the previous owner. Emma's first instinct was to be understanding, to give them endless chances. "They have kids," she said. "What if they end up homeless?" "What if you end up unable to pay your mortgage?" I countered. "Compassion is important, Emma, but so is protecting your investment. You can be firm and fair at the same time." She learned to set boundaries, to document everything, to follow the law while still treating tenants with respect. When the chronically late couple finally moved out, she found new tenants, a young teacher and a nurse, reliable people who paid on time and took care of the property. "It feels good," she told me one Sunday over dinner, "providing safe, affordable housing for people who need it, making money while making a difference." "That's the secret," I said. "Business doesn't have to be cold. It just has to be smart." As winter approached, I made a decision of my own. The building where Emma and Jack had lived, my first purchase, was fully renovated now. The units were updated, the problems fixed. It was time to sell and move on to bigger projects. "Are you sure?" Emma asked when I told her. "It's symbolic, isn't it? Your comeback story?" "Stories need endings," I said, "and I'm ready to write a new chapter." The building sold quickly, netting a substantial profit. I used part of it to buy a small apartment complex on the other side of town. 12 units, solid middle-income housing for families and seniors. The rest I put aside for a project I'd been considering. At the shelter's fundraising gala, where I was now a board member, I announced my plan: a transitional housing program specifically for women over 50 who found themselves suddenly homeless. It would provide not just shelter, but job training, financial counseling, and emotional support. "No woman should have to sleep in her car because her family decided she was expendable," I said to the crowded ballroom. "No mother should be told she's an extra mouth to feed. This program will ensure they have the time and resources to get back on their feet, just like I did." The applause was thunderous. Donations poured in. But the moment that mattered most was when Emma stood up from her table and walked to the stage. "I'd like to make the first donation," she said into the microphone, her voice shaking but determined. "My mother is the strongest person I know. She survived betrayal, my betrayal, and homelessness, and built something amazing. I want to be part of making sure other women get that same chance." She pledged a significant amount, her entire profit from her first year as a landlord. As she handed me the check, she whispered, "It doesn't make up for what I did, but maybe it helps balance the scales a little." Later that night, as we cleaned up after the gala, I found a quiet moment with Emma. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "The donation, it was a lot of money." "Yes, I did," she replied. "Mom, you taught me something important. Money isn't just about security or power. It's about choices. The choice to help or hurt, to build up or tear down. I choose to build up." Spring arrived with unexpected news. The city wanted to feature our story, the full story, in a documentary about family, homelessness, and redemption. They'd been following my work with the transitional housing program and wanted to show how personal experience drove public good. It means talking about everything: I warned Emma. Jack, the betrayal, all of it. Are you ready for that? Are you? She countered. It's your story too, your pain. We agreed to do it together. The filming took weeks, revisiting painful memories, but also celebrating how far we'd come. They interviewed Jack's mother, who spoke candidly about her son's issues and her hope that he was getting help. They filmed at the shelter, at Emma's duplex, at my new apartment complex. 3 years ago, I was sleeping in my car, I said to the camera. My daughter had chosen her husband's comfort over my survival. I thought my life was over. But sometimes the end is actually the beginning. Emma's interview was harder to watch. I failed her, she said, tears streaming. I failed the one person who never failed me. Living with that guilt, earning forgiveness, that's my life's work now. The documentary aired to critical acclaim. More importantly, it sparked conversations about family obligations, elder homelessness, and the power of second chances. Donations to the transitional housing program doubled. 3 more cities reached out about starting similar programs. But the most meaningful response came in a letter delivered to my office. The handwriting was familiar, Jack's. I saw the documentary, he wrote. I'm in treatment now, real treatment. Seeing myself through your eyes, both of your eyes, was devastating but necessary. I was the villain in your story, and I earned that role. I'm writing to say that I'm grateful you both survived me. Emma deserves better. You deserved better. I'm working to become someone who doesn't hurt the people who love him. Maybe someday I'll deserve forgiveness, but not today. Today I just wanted to say thank you for showing me who I'd become, and who I never want to be again. I showed the letter to Emma. She read it twice, then folded it carefully. Do you think people can really change? She asked. I think we're proof that they can, I replied. But change requires losing everything first. Rock bottom is a powerful teacher. What he put us through was horrible, she said. But in a twisted way, it freed us both. Me from him, you from any illusions about family loyalty. We're both stronger now. Stronger and wiser, I agreed, with better boundaries and clearer priorities. As summer bloomed, the transitional housing program opened its doors. The first resident was Martha, the woman I'd met in the shelter 3 years ago, still homeless, still forgotten by her children. Watching her walk into her new room, knowing she had 6 months to rebuild without fear of being kicked out, was worth every painful step of my journey. Emma volunteered as a financial counselor for the program, teaching women how to budget, build credit, and plan for the future. Watching her work with these women, sharing her own story of financial dependence and its dangers, filled me with pride. One evening, after a particularly long day at the program, Emma and I sat on the roof garden of my apartment complex, watching the sunset over the city. I've been thinking about relationships, Emma said suddenly. I'm terrified to trust anyone again. What if I choose another Jack? You won't, I said confidently, because now you know your worth. You know what control disguised as love looks like. You know that anyone who tries to isolate you from family, who makes you choose between them and others, isn't acting from love, but from insecurity. Is it wrong that I'm happy alone right now? She asked. Just me, my work, our Sunday dinners? There's nothing wrong with being complete on your own, I assured her. In fact, it's the only way to have a healthy relationship. 2 whole people choosing to share their lives, not 2 broken people trying to complete each other. As the months passed, our lives settled into a new rhythm. Emma's property business grew. She bought a second property, then a third, always careful, always smart. She hired her first employee, a young woman fleeing an abusive relationship, giving her both a job and a chance to rebuild. The transitional housing program expanded to 2 locations. We partnered with job training programs, healthcare providers, and mental health services. Every success story, and there were many, reinforced why this work mattered. One day, while reviewing applications for the program, I came across a name that made me pause. Helen Harrison, Jack's mother. Her application explained that she'd used her retirement savings to pay for Jack's treatment and could no longer afford her apartment. I sat staring at the application, remembering how she'd welcomed me when Emma and Jack first married, how she'd tried to warn Jack against throwing me out, how she'd apologized for her son's behavior. Life had a way of coming full circle in the most unexpected ways. I approved her application. When Helen arrived at the program, she looked older, worn down by worry and financial strain. But when she saw me, her face lit up with gratitude mixed with shame. "I didn't know you ran this program," she said. "I can go somewhere else if it's too awkward." "Don't be silly," I said, showing her to her room. "We're all just people trying to survive. Your son's choices aren't your burden to bear." She settled in well, becoming something of a mother figure to younger residents. She never spoke about Jack unless asked, and then only to say he was getting the help he needed. I respected her privacy and her pain. Emma found out about Helen during one of her volunteer sessions. She handled it with grace, treating Helen with the same professionalism she showed all residents. Later, she told me she felt sorry for the woman. "Imagine raising a child and watching them become someone cruel," she said. "At least I can blame Jack's influence for my behavior. What's his excuse?" "Sometimes there isn't one," I said. "Sometimes people are just broken in ways we can't fix." The year ended with an unexpected honor. The city named me Citizen of the Year for my work with homeless women. As I stood at the podium, looking out at an audience that included Emma, my colleagues, and dozens of women from the program, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. 3 years ago, I was nobody, I began. An extra mouth to feed, a burden to be discarded. But I learned something sleeping in my car, standing in food lines, wondering if I'd survive another night. We are all more than our worst moments. We are all capable of rising from the ashes of our old lives and building something new. The speech was well received, but the moment that mattered came later, when Emma found me in the quiet of my office. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I've been seeing a therapist for 2 years now, working through what happened with Jack, what I did to you. Today, she said something that hit me. She said the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And Mom, I could never be indifferent to you, even when Jack was filling my head with poison. The guilt I felt proved I still loved you, even when I was too weak to show it." "Love isn't just a feeling," I replied. "It's a choice, made daily. You're choosing it now, and that's what matters." "Do you forgive me?" she asked, the question she'd been afraid to voice for 3 years. I pulled her into a hug. "I forgave you the moment you knocked on my door that night, 3 years ago, crying and broken. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, but it means choosing love over anger. And I choose love." We held each other, mother and daughter, survivors both. The building I'd bought in anger had been sold in peace. The daughter who'd betrayed me had become my strongest ally. The homelessness that nearly broke me had led to purpose greater than I'd imagined. As we finally pulled apart, Emma laughed through her tears. "You know what's funny? Jack always said family was about blood. But real family is about who shows up, who does the work, who chooses love even when it's hard." "Especially when it's hard," I agreed. That night, I went home to my modest apartment. I'd never moved to anything fancy, preferring to put money into the programs, and sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea. 3 years ago, I'd sat at a similar table in a shelter, wondering if I'd survive. Now I knew the answer. Not only would I survive, I'd thrive. And I'd help others do the same. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for showing me what strength looks like. Thank you for being my mom. I love you." I smiled and typed back, "Love you too, sweetheart. See you Sunday for dinner." Some stories end with grand gestures or dramatic revelations. Mine ended with quiet redemption, daily choices to be better, and the knowledge that rock bottom can be a foundation for something beautiful. The woman who'd been thrown away as an extra mouth to feed had become someone who ensured no woman would feel that worthless again. But the best part? The daughter who'd once chosen comfort over compassion now chose love over fear every single day. And that was worth more than any building, any revenge, any amount of money. That was worth everything. As I prepared for bed, I looked at the photo on my nightstand. Emma and me at the program's opening, both smiling, both whole. We'd traveled through hell to get to that moment, but we'd traveled it together in the end. And that made all the difference. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new residents at the program, new opportunities to help. But tonight, I was content knowing that the worst chapter of my life had led to the best. That betrayal had led to growth. That being kicked out had led to finding my way home. Not to a place, but to a purpose. My name is Margaret. I was homeless. I was betrayed. I was thrown away. But I was not broken. And neither are you. Whatever your rock bottom looks like, whatever betrayal you've faced, whatever loss you're grieving, you can rise. You can rebuild. You can transform your pain into purpose. I'm proof of that. And someday, you will be too. The transitional housing program now has a motto, painted on the wall of every common room, from extra mouth to feed, to essential voice to heed. It reminds every woman who walks through our doors that their worth isn't determined by others, but by themselves. Emma suggested the motto. She said it captured both where we'd been and where we were going. I couldn't agree more. So that's our story, mine and Emma's. A story of fall and rise, of betrayal and redemption, of a mother and daughter who lost each other only to find something stronger in the ruins. A story that proves family isn't about blood or obligation, but about choosing each other again and again, especially when it's hard, especially when it matters most. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.